Imagine this moment for a second. You haven't truly broken down in a long time. Not because you've become stronger, but because you've learned how to endure. You've learned to suppress anger, swallow humiliation, disguise fear as rationality, and label pain as part of growth. You tell yourself, just hold on a little longer. And somehow, you've even become proud of your ability to endure. But there is one question you never dare to ask yourself. If you've grown accustomed to being hurt, and you call that maturity, are you still truly alive? You might say the world is cruel by nature. People hurt each other. Families, relationships, society, power structures, none of them are gentle. So you cultivate a new skill, numbness. You become calm, rational, predictable. You stop expecting too much, and therefore stop being disappointed. You tell yourself this is inner strength. But Carl Jung would pause, look straight at you, and quietly ask, who, deep inside you, is still waiting to be saved? Have you noticed that what hurts you the most is never a stranger's cruelty, but a single sentence from someone close to you? You try desperately to prove that you don't care, but that very effort reveals how deeply you still do. The more invincible you try to become, the more precisely the world strikes your weakest point. And so you begin to fantasize about a certain state, a state where nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. No one can shame you. No one can control you. No one can make you doubt yourself. You are no longer emotionally manipulated, no longer ruled by others' judgments. It sounds like ultimate freedom, doesn't it? But here is the paradox. If nothing can ever hurt you again, does that also mean nothing can truly reach you anymore? Jung believed that our deepest fear is not being wounded by others, but confronting our own inner chaos, shadow, and vulnerability. You think you are defending yourself against the world, but in reality, you may be running from yourself. You believe you are becoming unbreakable, while slowly severing your connection to life itself. So the real question was never, how do I make sure the world can never hurt me again? The real question is this: when you long for a life where nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again, what are you truly afraid of? Who are you trying to protect? And what are you quietly burying along the way? If you keep listening, you'll realize the answer is far more dangerous than you expect. If you are honest enough with yourself, you'll notice something deeply uncomfortable. What you truly fear is not pain itself, but loss of control. Not the wound, but the feeling, I was hit, and I couldn't stop it. I was exposed, and others saw it. I thought I had moved on, turns out I hadn't. Carl Jung described this as a split between the ego and the shadow. The version of you that the world sees is edited, acceptable, permitted to exist. Meanwhile, vulnerability, rage, envy, dependency, fear, those parts are pushed into darkness by your own hand. But here's the truth: the shadow does not disappear just because you refuse to look at it. Instead, it returns when you are least prepared, in relationships, in failure, in that sudden emptiness that hits late at night. You think someone else hurt you, but Jung would say, what truly wounds you is the part of yourself you have not integrated. So you build an entire, defensive personality. You become rational so emotions can't control you. You become distant so you won't expect too much. You glorify independence because reliance once cost you dearly. From the outside, this looks like maturity. Psychologically, it is often a long-term trauma adaptation. Nietzsche saw this clearly: when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. The more obsessed you become with not being hurt, the more your life energy is spent on defense, not creation. And modern society reinforces this relentlessly. It teaches efficiency, not feeling. Success, not failure. Self-branding, not self-understanding. You are told to move on, but no one warns you, if you never turn back to face your shadow, it will eventually sabotage your life. So, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again stops being a wish, and becomes an obsession. A desire to shut down feeling, eliminate vulnerability, erase risk altogether. But Jung would remind you, a person who can no longer feel pain often can no longer feel what is real. You think you are pursuing safety. In truth, you may be locking yourself inside a psychological prison, one without pain, but also without vitality. And this is only the surface. The most dangerous things are rarely the blows that destroy you outright, but the quiet changes you label as rational, mature, or letting go. When you decide that no one will ever hurt you again, life does become safer, but it also becomes smaller. You begin to avoid conversations that truly matter, because honesty requires exposure. You treat "it doesn't matter" as wisdom, because caring once came at a cost. You learn to process everything alone, forgetting that human beings were never designed for absolute isolation. Psychologically, this is called emotional deactivation. To prevent future wounds, the brain lowers your entire emotional range. Joy becomes less sharp. Sadness less deep. You stop swinging to extremes and appear stable, but your sense of aliveness quietly fades with it. Society rewards this condition. Because someone who doesn't express pain is easier to manage. Someone who doesn't ask deep questions fits more smoothly into the system. So you become functionally normal, able to work, socialize, cooperate, smile. Yet in a moment no one else sees, a realization strikes: nothing has truly moved you in a very long time. Jung once said something chillingly precise: what is not made conscious appears as fate. When you refuse to face your inner fear and vulnerability, they do not disappear. They return as failed relationships, burnout, emptiness, addiction, a slow erosion of meaning. You may begin to question life without knowing why. You may lack nothing, yet feel perpetually empty. You may suffer no great tragedy, yet sense a constant, low-grade collapse inside. This is the invisible consequence. No dramatic explosion. No clear enemy. Just one truth slowly taking shape: you are alive, but you are quietly exiting your own life. And what is most disturbing is this: you may even feel proud of it. Because you tell yourself, at least I can't be hurt anymore. True rebellion is not becoming colder. It is stopping your escape from yourself. You believe that never being hurt again required higher walls. But Jung would tell you this: walls do not protect, they only delay. The more you try to block pain, the more energy it gathers in the shadows. Until one day, it no longer appears as emotion, but as a way of life: numbness, distance, the inability to truly connect. That's why the real breakthrough is counterintuitive. Not harder, but more conscious. Jung introduced an unsettling yet essential concept: individuation. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. And wholeness means holding light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, reason and chaos. You were never hurt because you were vulnerable. You were hurt because you did not understand your vulnerability. When you begin to observe fear instead of suppressing it, when you allow yourself to admit dependency, longing, love, and failure, you discover a radical truth: once vulnerability is seen, it loses its power to destroy. Nietzsche wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But few notice the condition beneath it: you must face it, not flee from it. Those who truly figured life out all endured an inward descent. Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations at the height of power, constantly reminding himself of human fragility. Dostoevsky, through exile and near death, saw both the darkness and redemption of the soul. Jung himself, after breaking with Freud, fell into years of psychological crisis before truly understanding the unconscious. They did not choose to become unhurt. They chose to expand the self until pain was no longer the center. This is where rebellion begins. Not by raising a fist at the world, but by saying to your inner fear, I see you. When you stop spending your life defending, avoiding, pretending to be strong, you may be shocked to realize, the world feels less threatening. Because what truly made you fragile was never other people, but the unseen fracture between you and yourself. Now, at last, we face the question you've been avoiding: does a state truly exist where nothing and nobody can hurt you again? The answer may unsettle you. Because Jung's answer is yes, but not in the way you imagine. Nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again does not mean the world becomes kind, nor that you become invincible. It means this: harm no longer defines who you are. You finally realize a brutal yet liberating truth: pain was never the real problem. The problem was that you treated pain as a verdict on your worth. When someone rejected you, you said, I am not enough. When relationships collapsed, you said, I failed. When the world felt cold, you said, I am unnecessary. But Jung would ask something deeper: who taught you to treat external events as judgments of the self? At the moment individuation completes, the world does not stop striking, but the strikes no longer reach the core. Because you now know the difference between, I experience pain, and, I am pain. This is where awakening truly happens. You no longer beg to be understood, because you understand yourself. You no longer fear loss, because loss cannot erase your existence. You no longer cling to being loved, because love no longer defines who you are. At this point, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again is not a comforting mantra, it is the final form of a psychological structure. You realize, the unbreakable are not those without shadows, but those who walk beside them. The world remains cruel. People remain selfish. Relationships still fracture. But none of these determine your inner fate anymore. You no longer seek safety outside, because you have become safety itself. And that is freedom in Jung's sense. Not escaping the world, but standing within it, without losing yourself. When you truly reach a certain stage, something strange begins to happen: you become quieter, and the world grows uneasy around you. You stop rushing to explain yourself. You stop needing to be understood. You stop proving that you are good, right, or worthy of being kept. You simply stand there, clear, whole, and silent. And it is precisely at this moment that you realize something unsettling: the world does not welcome those who can no longer be hurt. Because a person who cannot be hurt is a person who cannot be controlled. When you no longer seek approval, praise loses its power. When you no longer fear abandonment, threats stop working. When you no longer define yourself through pain, the keys to manipulating your emotions are taken away. This is why Jung said, the path of individuation is, by nature, a lonely one. Not because everyone will leave you, but because you no longer fit inside old psychological structures. You begin to notice tension forming in certain relationships. Not because you've become cruel, but because you no longer comply. You no longer silence yourself for harmony. You no longer sacrifice truth for connection. You no longer betray your intuition just to avoid being disliked. You begin to say no. You begin to pause. You begin to withdraw from interactions that once felt familiar, yet hollow. Many people do not truly need you. What they need is a container for their emotions, anxieties, and unfinished trauma. When you stop playing that role, they will say you've changed, that you've become cold, selfish, distant. But the truth is far simpler: you have finally reclaimed yourself from their projections. At this stage, the real danger is no longer being hurt. The real danger is this: you may be tempted to go back. Because loneliness is real. No longer being needed can feel empty. When you are no longer caught in emotional drama, life can become painfully quiet. There are no emotional roller coasters, no rescuing and being rescued. No violent intimacy built on shared wounds. And you may find yourself asking, is this way of living really worth it? This is the final threshold. Jung described it as the passage from identification with suffering to identification with existence itself. You no longer use, "I've been hurt," as proof of depth. You no longer seek validation through being understood. You no longer confirm your worth by being needed. You simply exist. Without performance. Without explanation. Without display. You begin to realize that a person like this cannot be consumed, cannot be easily labeled, cannot be quickly understood. And that is precisely why nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again is no longer a defensive posture, but a state of being. You are not numbing your emotions. You are no longer treating the world as a judge. You are not becoming indifferent. You are no longer using pain as a passport. You are not abandoning people. You are finally standing on your own side. And when you arrive here, you understand something quietly radical: true freedom is not happiness, success, or safety. It is this: you no longer need anything to prove that you deserve to exist.